One is we're a little bit behind schedule, like about 5 minutes. But do people want to take a break for a short period of time or just move on? You know where the bathrooms are. You can certainly excuse yourself if you need to. The other thing is there are extra folders. They come in. And for those people that there weren't enough folders, they are somewhere. We do have more folders. Oh, Brian's got them. So if you need extra folders, you can have them in the back there. So let me turn it over to Danny, who will do the same thing on the CalPERS side.
So is my slides, I guess while we're waiting for those slides to come on. So how many people were at the CalPERS Educational Forum a couple weeks ago, I guess? Just trying to get an idea of how many people are going to hear probably a lot of the same things we talked about over there. But I guess you can't hear this enough, so hopefully it won't be too repetitive. And also because I don't think I can turn around and have Ed help answer my questions, I have brought David Lamoureux and Anthony Sweeney to help answer any questions that may arise. I probably won't follow the PowerPoint exactly, because based on the conversation you had, you covered some of the information. I won't necessarily go back over the definitions or what the bill does and try to just answer what I think are some of your questions. So I believe that Joycelyn covered what AB 340 was. So I'm just going to jump into the new member definition. Because there is a little bit of difference between CalPERS and CalSTRS because of the way the law is written and how it impacts their new members. We are basing new members on membership date. So it's not on hire date, it's on membership date. So if you have part-time employees that are working for you right now that are not CalPERS members and in the future become CalPERS members, they would meet the definition of new member and they would go into the new formula. So it is based on membership date and not hire date. Other than that, a new member is someone that you hire for the first time after January 1st, 2013 that is not in any other public retirement system. Another way a person is a new member is if you hire somebody from another public retirement system that we have reciprocity with, which is mainly the 37 Act County systems. There are a number of other city systems. We have a list on our website under our reciprocity section that lists all of the retirement systems that we have reciprocal agreements with. We are also including, even though it's not formal reciprocity, as Joycelyn said, we are recognizing that reciprocity with CalSTRS, with JRS, LRS, which are other, JRS and LRS are other systems we administer, but we don't necessarily have a formal reciprocal agreement with them. But we will be probably promulgating regulations to clarify that we are considering them under the definition of subject to reciprocity. Obviously, if CalSTRS can get a statute change, then we can also rely on that. But in the meantime, we will be looking at getting regulations. So if you hire someone from another reciprocal system and they've changed jobs within 6 months, they would not be considered a new member. But if they've longer than 6 months, then they would be a new member. If you hire someone that works on another retirement system that is not, we do not have reciprocity with, then they would be considered a new member. Within CalPERS, if you hire someone from another CalPERS covered employer and that job changes within 6 months, they would not be considered a new member. If the break in service is more than 6 months, it would be considered a new member. So if I work for the state, if I leave and go in the private sector for a year, I come and get hired by a school district, I would be a new member and I would go in the 2 at 62 formula. For the purposes of this section, changing employers, a school employer is all one employer. So if a person changes jobs within school districts, within County Office of Educations, we're viewing that based on the law as one employer. So they can move around from the school. The other big thing about that is if they leave, they work for a school district, they go out into the private sector and work for 10 years and they come back to a school district, they would not be a new member, okay? Because that 6-month break in service only comes into play if they've changed employers. So since they would be technically haven't changed employers, we would not consider that a new member. Now again, this is all assuming that this is someone that was in the system prior to January 1st, 2013. You hire somebody once a person, we're going to basically say once a person has been deemed a new member. So if you hire someone in 2013, they're a new member, they leave and then come back, obviously they're going to still go in the 2 at 60 formula. They're going to be a new member. So any questions about, here we go.
So just want to clarify, those they're not members, those folks who were part of an alternative retirement system, say, these paraeducators we've been speaking about, part-time paraeducator, maybe didn't qualify for PERS prior to January 1st of 2013, they're going to be considered new members if they didn't become a member of CalPERS until after January 1st, 2013?
Yes, that's how we're interpreting it, yes.
Okay, so, because that's kind of a difference of how we've been thinking. We've been thinking that if they've been doing kind of like the CalSTRS, if they've been doing CalPERS covered employment.
The difference is the section that deals with the new retirement formula for CalSTRS, it says hire date when they were hired, and the section that we're following, it talks about when they become a member. It's not when they were hired, it's when they become a member.
So regardless of whether they were Social Security, Apple, ours, whatever, if they weren't actually a PERS member or a member of a group that shared reciprocity.
Yeah, unless they were in another public retirement system that we have reciprocity with, then it would not count.
Okay. And you don't consider ours or any of those to be public retirement systems, right?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
I just wanted to clarify. If someone worked for a school district and they either moved and were unemployed for a year, stayed home with a baby for a year, and then came back at another school district, that would still be considered an existing member, not a new member, even though it's greater than 6 months.
Correct.
Okay.
Couple questions from here in the front.
In reporting, when we set up an appointment for a CalPERS member, is there going to be a question if, let's say, that person established membership in CalSTRS or one of the other reciprocal systems? How is PERS going to know that? Are they going to question reporting because now we're setting an appointment date after 2013?
I think, well, Anthony, you have an answer for that question? I think I know the answer, but I'll let Anthony answer it.
Thanks for making me feel wanted, Dan.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to be adding information to our enrollment process where we will require you to put in reciprocal information and gather that data from your new hire. And then there'll be fields in that enrollment process that ask you if they're reciprocal. And if you answer yes, then we'll ask you, I think it's a series of 5 or 6 questions of input fields, like the membership date in their original reciprocal system, what the system was, what their termination date was. And then we'll use all those inputs to determine whether they're a new member or what we're calling a classic member.
One more question.
Yeah. Sure.
So let's say the same person is not a member of STRS but has been performing credible service prior to 2013. Then they come into PERS after 2013, they're a new member.
Yes, they were not a member of, if they were not a member of CalSTRS, then yes, they would be a new member. Yeah. We're going to get, I don't know if we'll get past the new member question, definitions.
So a question from a county office perspective, that we have districts that have not enrolled members because they're not going to meet the 1,000 hour threshold. Mm-hmm. And we have a report that our system will run towards the end of the year and say this person probably is going to meet the threshold, and we contact the district, and this person should have always been enrolled, and the district made the error of not projecting forward and realizing that this person should have always been enrolled back to, let's say, September when they started, but we don't realize it till February. Can we fight you on that? Can we enroll them?
I'll have Anthony. I guess it'd be the same process as we would stick to the same process we use now. So if we would do it now, we would do it
Correct, and Emily DeFlores is here from our membership unit if you need to correct me, but there will always be a need for corrections, right? So anything that was reported in error and that backdates a membership date, arrears, then we would go back, and when you finally report the corrected date, it would go and put them in the proper formula. And then you would have to make any corresponding contribution changes or adjustments through the payroll process if needed.
My question is on refunding. If I have a member who has refunded, let's say they refunded their CalPERS account in 2012 and they've come back to us in 2013 and they're a rehire, or a new hire, are they a new member and they're under the new rules, or are they?
No, I mean, we're basically not taking, whether or not a person has refunded does not make a difference in our determination. It's whether or not they were ever an active member of the system prior to 2012. One more, then we probably should move on.
Just a quick check. You gave an example of somebody who works in the schools, then goes to a private employer, and then comes back to schools. What if they manage to go from schools to state and back to schools? So,
again, it depends on for the school district, it wouldn't matter. So if the person was an existing, and we're going to use I guess maybe I'll start introducing the word classic employer. That's what we're going to use. If you're not in PEPRA, we're going to call you a classic member. So if you're a classic member for that school district, you go to the state, and then you come back to the school district, you're always going to be a classic member for that school district. So if I'm working for the school district, was laid off, I had a break in service of a year, got a job with the state, I would be a PEPRA member. I would go in the 2 at 62. If I later get rehired by the state or by the school district, I would still be a classic member for that school district.
So they would have two different benefit formulas anyway, but for the state they would have the new member. Yeah,
there are situations that we're envisioning and where a person is going to have both be a new member for the purposes of PEPRA, but also have classic service under an employer because of the fact that we cover so many employers, and we have to deal with the state employees, the school district employees, and the public agency employees, and we know that there's going to be times when a person changes jobs after a break in service, and they're going to be now a new member, and we're going to have to treat them differently for these two sets of service. There's going to be different rules that apply to those service periods under certain situations.
I prefer to be called a platinum member.
Platinum member? Well, maybe we can change that. Yes. We can tie it into like healthcare reform. You're going to be silver, gold, platinum. So, okay. Since I know that I'm probably going to run out of time, I'm just going to, this is basically, and I can say this presentation is probably obviously geared toward the fact that, again, we cover state, school, public agencies, but I will try to just highlight the school employer stuff. So basically your new members will go into the 2 at 62 formula, which is again a different formula than you'll have under the CalSTRS system. If you do happen to have a safety formula, some of the school districts I know have safety. If you do have safety, you would go into one of these three formulas, the 2 at 57, 2.5 at 57, or the 2.7 at 57. The one you go into is the one that's closest to your formula that you have now. When you look at the age 55 benefit factor, and it's got to be lower than that. So I don't really need to, this slide, next slide just kind of tracks the new formulas for miscellaneous. Pretty much everybody goes into 2 at 62. We do have some public agencies that actually have a 1.5 at 65 formula, so they wouldn't have to change. They could stay with that formula. So here's the one for those of you that do have safety plans. If your safety folks are in 3 at 50, 3 at 55, or 2 at 50, you would now put your new members into the 2.7 at 57 plan. If you're in a 2 at 55 benefit formula, those new members would go into 2 at 57. There's been questions about your, I don't know if it's really an issue with with the school districts because of the way your contracts work. But there's no need to amend your contracts prior to January 1st. We're automatically set it up so that your new members will go into the new benefit formula, the 3-year final comp. So everything that has to change because of PEPRA will automatically be changed in the system to apply to these new members. And then we'll carry over all the other optional benefits. So I know the school, most of you are all in the school pool. I don't know if there's anybody has their own, has contracted with us outside of the school pool. So all the school pool benefits will go forward for these new members, except for the things that have to change by statute, which is, again, the lower formula. Everybody has to have 3-year final comp. So nothing has to be done on your end at this point. Talked about this, Jocelyn talked about the salary caps. I won't go into repeat what the bill does. I would just add that at the onset, and David Lamoureux can correct me if I'm wrong, on the onset, you will be able to stop the employee contributions once they hit the cap, but we will continue to collect the employer contributions above the cap, which we're basically treating it the same way that we currently treat the 401A 17 limits. If you have folks that are above the 401A 17 limits now, we stop the employee contributions when they hit that federal salary cap, but we can continue the employer contributions. I think it's important to remember, though, it's not costing you any additional money because the liabilities are calculated based on the cap. Then the actuaries calculate a dollar amount that's owed, and then it's just a matter of what payroll you take that dollar amount and spread it over. So we're just going to be spreading that dollar amount over the entire payroll, rather than if we stop collecting contributions at the cap, we would just spread that amount over a lower payroll, but we'd still at the end of the day collect the same dollar amount. We are looking down the road to stop employer contributions and employee contributions at that cap, but for the time being, until we can build that into our process, we are going to keep with the same way we treat the federal salary limits, where the employee stops but the employer doesn't stop. Any questions on that? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, there are.
Great. Moving on to the next slide.
With the cap, will my CalPERS, at the time of uploading a file, be able to tell us that a person has reached a cap, especially if we're reporting for multiple employers? So we'll have to adjust contributions at that point. Okay.
Yes. So right now we do. I don't know how many of you have employees that reach the federal salary limit, which I think is $245,250. We do send out a letter saying this person is getting close to the cap. And so that same process, I believe, will go in place, where we'll send a notification to say the person is reaching that cap. So we have another question here in front.
Actually, I have 2 questions, Danny. One, well, it's not really a question, it's a statement. I don't get that whole employer contribution thing. I don't understand that. Are you saying that based on the actuarial studies, that the rates would be higher and thus we'd be paying the same amount on a smaller amount of payroll? Is that what you're saying?
Right. So when the actuaries calculate the liability, they take into account that there is a cap. So they take into account that there is this salary cap, and that's going to cap pensionable compensation. And even though you see a contribution rate, what they really do is calculate a dollar. The employer owes us $10 million. And so instead of saying send us $1 million every month, they take that $10 million and say, okay, what's their expected payroll? Send us 10% of pay. Mm-hmm. So if we lowered the amount of pay, if we said, instead of sending this over the entire payroll we expect, send it over this reduced payroll.
The rates would go up.
We would say, instead of sending us 10% of pay, send us 11% of pay.
Right, okay.
So
that's because I was thinking what you're meaning.
Yeah.
But that's, actuarial stuff is so convoluted to me, but.
Yeah. So, because they actually calculate a dollar amount, and that's what they're expecting to come in, but they don't tell you send us X amount of dollars. Yeah. They convert it to a payroll contribution.
And I didn't mean to offend any actuaries in the audience. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. It's just crazy stuff. But My other question had to do with, the caps varying based on whether, the employer contributes to Social Security or not. Do you know, you're not making an assumption that all the LEAs are contributing to Social Security, are you? Because county offices are not, and.
No.
Okay, so it's gonna be based on the individual LEA? Is that
Right.
true? Okay.
Right.
All right.
It'll be based on whether or not that member is coordinated with Social Security.
Oh, okay.
So yeah. So
And you know that by member?
we know that by member. We know by what, because they are put into a rate. Their contract
Okay, all right,
plan
great.
they're either with Social Security or without Social Security. So we know that. We have a couple more questions.
When an employee has multiple positions, let's say one with Social Security and one without, and there will be two separate caps for that person, and if they are outside Orange County, are you going to tell us that, make adjustment or something?
We'll have to look at that one. I don't know. I'd like to say yes. We'll have to test it out and make sure that will work across separate positions or with coordinated and not coordinated, right? And I will say that if you need an example of how this works, Vina has an example that she sent, and we reviewed it, and it looks good. Just maybe a minor tweak, but so she can provide it to all of you, and you can get a visual of how it works.
I think there were still questions over here, or oh, same question. Good. We have one more right here.
Okay, I'm just kind of curious as to once somebody reaches these caps, what is the reporting going to look like to you? Are we going to be reporting them as a member? No contributions? That seems like it would be a red flag. I mean, what are you guys expecting to see? And this is kind of for both ends.
Yeah. Well,
So for CalSTRS, so your question was when somebody reaches the cap, will there be a change in the reporting? For us, we don't anticipate that. You're going to continue to report full pay rates, as Joycelyn mentioned, and full earnings. We'll track the cap on our end, and we know that there are multiple employers, so we plan to feed back to all impacted employers whether or not someone has reached the cap and no contributions are due. And we also hope to put some other functionality in, so Cassie, I may not get them all right. Like year-to-date earnings, has someone reached the cap? Have they not reached the cap? Potentially how close they are to reaching the cap. So for us, no changes to reporting for you. Does that make sense? Okay.
were you going to add anything, Anthony, or is that the same?
Just,
I mean,
the same thing, just that when it hits the cap, then you'll stop reporting the contributions. So there'll be 0% contributions possibly for the last 4 or 5 months of the calendar year. And we'll recognize that those earnings are exceeding the cap, and therefore we're not expecting contributions. And if you try to send them to us, we'll reject it and let you know that the contributions are in excess.
Yeah, because the pay rate and the earnings are still needed to calculate the service credit. And again, this process is already in place for the federal salary limit, so it's something that the system already handles and does.
When you clarify the other part about the employees having different coverage, if we can have at the same time, if an employee has 2 different positions, a classified position, a certificated position, like under each system, so they are independent of each other, like they can have a cap of 136 for teaching job and a classified. Okay, thank you.
Nothing more.
Since all earnings are not creditable for CalPERS, how will you guys know when we actually meet the cap for an employee? Because we don't report non-creditable to PERS. Or is it only on creditable comp?
Right. The cap's only on pensionable, what can be included in your retirement benefit for calculating retirement benefits. So this cap's on pensionable comp. It's not on how much someone can get paid or anything else. It's just, this is what can be included in your retirement calculation.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right. So I think I'm probably already at my time limit, so let me just see.
I have a question from the field.
Sure.
For both CalSTRS and CalPERS, is the dollar cap based on the fiscal year calendar or calendar year? And also, since the law starts as of 1/1/2013, if the cap is based on the fiscal year calendar from January to June, can employees earn the total cap for the 6-month period?
It's based on calendar year.
Yeah, but it's currently based on the calendar year. One of the things that we're going to be proposing to the legislature for CalSTRS is to be based on the fiscal year, because that's how everything is done, is on a school year basis. So we're hoping to get that changed, but for the time being, it's based on the calendar year.
Okay, as I already mentioned, all new members will go into 3-year final comp. The other area where there's obviously going to be could be some differences between us and CalSTRS, and I'll just tell you right now, I don't have the answers, so don't ask questions. If you were at the Ed Forum, is this whole thing about pensionable compensation. I will just make sure it's clear that for your existing employees, nothing changes. For the new members, there is a new definition of pensionable compensation. We're still trying to figure out what that means for CalPERS. Our laws much different than most of the other systems as far as the definitions that we use and the terminologies that we use. But it's the one area will be consistent, as they've mentioned, is whatever is reportable is going to have to be to similarly situated employees. It's got to be on a pay schedule. This whole regular and recurring. But we will be going through trying to figure out what forms of compensation besides base pay can be reportable. We'll be introducing either statute changes in the PERL to clarify. We'll keep the laws in for existing employees, and we'll probably add something in the PERL for new hires so it's clear what's reportable, what's not reportable. We'll probably also have to do regulations. So it's just going to be a work in progress. We will get out more information to you as soon as we can. Hopefully we'll have some more answers, some more clarity next week as we continue to work through this. We have folks kind of back at the office trying to go through our regulations and all our forms of special comp and trying to figure out what things can be reportable, but we really don't have any hard answers for this. I know we're getting a lot of questions about what can I keep reporting, what can't I report, and we at this point don't have the answer. We're also trying to work with the 37 Act county systems and making sure that we are consistent in the interpretations from the different retirement systems. So we will have information on that as soon as possible. So hopefully no one will ask a question, because like I said, I don't know if I have an answer. So normal cost, we had a slide here about what's normal cost. I think they answered that earlier. So the main thing is for school districts, for your new members, you'll have to pay at least half of the total annual normal cost, or the current contribution rate of similarly situated employees. There also prohibits what's called EPMC, and then it goes on to talk about whether or not there's an MOU impairment. So the short answer is that I'll give you is we're going to calculate the normal cost. Half the normal cost for school districts is 6%. So if you want to know what half the normal cost is, it's 6%. Now, as to the extent as whether or not your new members have to pay 6% will depend on whether you determine if there's an MOU impairment, meaning that we're not going to define what an MOU impairment is. We're not going to decide for you if your MOUs are impaired. It's really going to have to be between your labor folks and probably your employee organizations. But if you the example that we typically hear about is if you have EPMC in a contract agreement right now or an MOU, then your new members you can continue to pay EPMC for new members if you've determined that that's an MOU impairment. But once that contract expires, then you cannot renegotiate, or you amend that contract, you can't renegotiate and provide EPMC to anybody that meets that definition of new member. So EPMC, for all intents and purposes, is going to go away for these new members. As far as whether or not your members will ever pay more than, these new members will pay more than 6%, again, I think that's whether or not you have some type of contract or an agreement with them to pay more than that. Otherwise, we're going to be expecting 6%. If you have some kind of agreement, through your MOU, cost sharing, some other agreement, the bill does allow for you to negotiate and contract for what we call cost sharing, which is basically having the employee agree to pay part of the employer contribution, and you can formally contract with CalPERS for us to recognize that. You can now, well, I'm not sure how school districts are going to do it. Yeah, they can't do that. It's for public agencies. Even though they put it in there and says it applies to you, I don't think you guys can do it. Sorry about that. I'm getting ahead of myself. I've been doing to this conversation too much. Question up here in the front. Yeah.
I want to make sure I understand the employer paid. If you have a current agreement, contract, or MOU that allows for employer paid, that, let's say, doesn't expire until June 30th, 2013, current and new members are covered. But once that contract or MOU expires, if you create a new or establish a new contract or MOU, the classic members can continue employer paid, but the new members cannot. Is that correct?
Correct. So let me just point out that our reading of the statute and how we're implementing it is we do not believe that this changes anything for your existing employees regarding EPMC or even for what their contribution rate is. Obviously, I think the governor's goal is that every employee, whether classic or new, pays half the normal cost, and EPMC goes away for every single employee. But it doesn't require that you do it for your classic employees. I think that's just what he wants you to do. For new members, it's clear that they have to pay half the normal cost, and EPMC goes away. The only correction I would make is, your organization is going to have to determine whether or not what is an impaired MOU and whether or not EPMC will continue for those new members. I don't want you to say CalPERS said it can continue. I mean, I think that's each agency is going to have to make that determination as to what that means.
So potentially a brand new employee in CalPERS starting in January would be paying less than the classic employee?
Yes, but but their benefit is also less. So your classic employees are paying 7% by statute for the 2 at 55 formula. So all of these people are going to go into 2 at 62, and half their normal cost is 6. Their rate's going to be different. Or it could be different.
And what about the employer rate?
I'm sorry. The employee contribution rate can be different for your classic members and your new members.
Danny, can the employee rate be different for one district to another? For same, like under Orange County, it will be the same, right? For all Orange County, same, or all school employers?
Right. There'll be
for new members.
There'll be one employee rate for the all 2 at 62 pool, right?
Okay. Thank you.
What does that mean for the employer rates for the new employees?
Well, David Lamoureux will answer that question.
I'll take that one. And just for the record, I'm an actuary, and I think we're nuts. So don't worry about feeling bad about actuarial stuff. On this question, we're going to be sending a letter to all the school employers to tell you basically that just confirm that if you're for those that are in the schools pool, that you're in the members under 262, that new members will pay 6%, and telling you that your employer rate is not going to change January 1st. It's about 11.4 right now. It's going to stay there. Over time, as we do actuarial evaluations and we see more and more of these new members, the rate's going to start trending down. But we're always going to provide one employer rate for all your employers, for all your employees, just to make it easier for everyone. So you don't have to worry about who's, what rate do I pay for new members, what rate do I pay for the classic one. For those of you that have contracted with CalPERS for your school's police, you have a contract you're kind of treated as a local agency. So we'll also be sending you a separate letter telling you what the member rate is for your safety employees, what the employer rate is starting January 1st. So you'll be getting all of this over the next, hopefully by a little bit after Thanksgiving or early December, you're all going to be getting these letters in the mail.
So I understand that we can provide defined contribution plans for amounts above the cap, but if we're paying the employer portion of that rate all the way past that cap, then really the employer costs for those people, if we did want to provide an extra plan, under the law we can't exceed the employer contribution for the amount under. So we really can't provide them a defined contribution plan if we're still paying the employer rate. Does that make sense?
I'm not sure.
Hold on, Brian, can you give him, I just want to make sure I understand the question, because I think it's a...
So we're capped by law for the amount of contribution we can make above the cap.
Right.
And do a defined contribution plan. We can't contribute more than what we contribute for the amount under.
That's a percentage of pay.
Percentage of pay,
not
but
dollars.
I understand, but if we're paying that same percentage on CalPERS, if that cap doesn't stop the employer side, we can't then contribute to a defined contribution plan for that employee to make up for that difference.
Yeah, because of the way CalPERS is dealing with it, right?
Yeah. Our understanding is, so basically the total cost at CalPERS, at least for the new benefit, is about 12% of pay, 6% member, 6% employer. Our understanding is you'll be able to set up a defined contribution plan and putting up to 12% of pay. Even though we're still collecting employer contributions, I think based on the way the law is written, you'll be able to set up, because all it says is that you can set up a DC and not pay and not put more in it than what the total plan normal cost is. And we've stated already that it's about 12% for schools. So you'll be able to put. Yeah.
Sure. So if we did decide to provide a defined contribution plan above the cap, then we would be paying the 11.4 plus, so we'd actually be paying 23% for that employee. No. What do you mean? Because if I did contribute 12 though, and I'm obligated to pay you 11.4, then it's 23.4 is what I would be contributing if I wanted to invest.
Well, again, I think it's the reason why you're paying we're saying 11.4 because that additional money, a lot of that is just your unfunded liability. And so we're just continuing for ease, spreading that over your entire payroll. Again, they can just spread it over your payroll of your classic members. You're still going to pay that dollar amount. I mean, so I think the answer is the actuaries could send you and say, for your new members, the rate is 12, you pay 6, an employee pays 6, and keep a separate rate. But I'm not sure if that's what you guys really want. But that's really what we're doing, but then we're just aggregating them together.
My point is that there's been a lot of concern about acquiring talent for CalPERS positions if you have that cap. And so the point is that we want to be able to entice people into our industry, but we need to be aware of this as employers because that's part of our costs that we're going to have to budget for if we do want to provide that additional benefit. So I just wanted to make sure that I'm clear with it.
So I think So I mean, I think the answer to your question though is that you can do the DC, and you could put you're capped at putting 6% into that DC plan as the employer piece, and then 6%, I guess the employee can put in 6, you can put in 6. Because that's the norm, that's the contribution really for that 2 at 62 formula is 12%. I think we got a question here, and then I probably have to wrap up.
On the contribution rate for the employee, it says that it's half or the current contribution rate of similarly situated employees. But are we going to receive a letter that states that we're going to have that at 6%, or can we continue it at the 7%?
We are going to, well, probably be more clarity on this coming out in the weeks, and I know this is an area that is possibly the legislature is looking at clarifying. So I think the way we're looking at this and the way that we're going to define similarly situated is someone is basically in the same formula unless you have a collective bargaining agreement. Now, if you've I know some school districts, and we know some contracting agencies, I'm not sure about the school districts, but I know some contracting agencies have actually collectively bargained that anybody hired after such and such date pays X%. And I think in those situations, you could require these new members to pay whatever's in that collective bargaining agreement. So if you have collective bargaining agreements where you're having your employees pay more than what's statutorily required, I don't see why that would stop. So in those situations, they could be paying more than 6. I think what we're trying to say is we're going to set the statutorily required contribution at 6%, and that's what we're expecting to come in. To the extent you guys have some kind of agreement or, MOU or something where that's going to require them to pay more, that's going to be, between you and your employees. We're not going to set the contribution rate at, say, 7% because that's what everybody else in the school pool is paying is 7%, because some of them might be paying more. Right?
Scott Yates, CalPERS Office of Stakeholder Relations. With respect to the agenda and the other items still remaining, let's give Danny a few minutes to zip through his last few slides. And before he finishes, we'll point out some resources we have available online for you, including a video from our educational forum and a pension reform guide that you can access for more information.
We got questions about post-retirement, so
Well, I don't know. So let me just, I guess before we do anticipate putting out some additional FAQs next week following our board meetings. We have posted on our website a video of the Ed Forum and the presentation we did, which is about 1 hour and 15 minutes, where we presented on pension reform, answered a bunch of questions. We have an FAQ out there already. We'll add to that FAQ, hopefully addressing some of these questions around the contribution rate, pensionable comp, and the working after retirement, because I know there's a lot of questions on working after retirement. So that will be available hopefully next week following the board meetings, so either Wednesday or Thursday. And we'll try to make sure that it gets shot out to everybody so that you're aware of it. So sure, yes.
I know there is a difference. I was trying to hurry. That's why I didn't wait for the microphone. I understand there's a difference of opinion between, or maybe there's a difference in the language. I'm not really sure. A difference between CalSTRS and CalPERS as it relates to the 180-day sit-out period. And CalSTRS has said that it applies to retirees that retire January 1st, 2013 and after. My understanding is that CalPERS looks at it as including even those people who have retired within the last 6 months of 2012 that would still be considered within that same 180-day sit-out period. Can you explain that?
Yes. So first off, we haven't made a final decision, okay, but there is a difference because CalSTRS has their own working after retirement statutes so they're kind of carved out. I guess I don't know if that's the right word, but they're kind of carved out of the PEPRA working after retirement, and their own laws apply. And so that's how come they have that different interpretation. So the working after retirement provisions in PEPRA that we have to follow apply to all retirees, all current and future retirees, But the question about whether or not someone that has retired in 2012 and returns as a retired annuitant in 2012, whether or not we would say, well, you have to stop working on January 1st and make sure you've sat out these 180 days, that is something that we haven't made a decision on. So I think we're probably leaning that it's not going to be, we would not apply it, but nothing's been decided, and that'll be one of the things that I hope we'll have a final answer next week. But it is clear that if the person retires, one area I wanted to say it's clear, if they retire in 2012 and don't seek employment until 2013 as a retired annuitant, they would have to have had a 180-day waiting period from the retirement date. Not 180 days from January 1st, but 180 days from their retirement date. So if they retired, say, on October 1st, and they came back in February and tried to be hired as a retired annuitant, we would say they haven't met the 180-day waiting period. They need to wait, until March. So does that make sense?
Okay, so then there is a difference between CalSTRS and CalPERS in that if you're still within that 180 days, or
right. I mean, right, and it's because their retirement, they have a different statute. They have a different statute that they have their own statute in the Ed Code that they're looking at, and it is written differently.
Okay.
We're following the provision that's the 180-day waiting period that's written in PEPRA.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Correct
Okay.
distinction.
Okay.
So it is clear in their statute that it only applies to people who retire after. But the provisions under PEPRA, let's take away the 180-day waiting period. In PEPRA, there's all kinds of other things that talks about the 960 hours, the way you have to report, this and that. That's going to apply to regardless of when you retire. All those provisions are going to apply to anybody that has been retired or is going to retire. So that's where I think the difference.
Yeah.
Then you have
Okay, thank
distinction. So I will do one more question. Go ahead.
Okay,
I
I have a question. The limit, the post-retirement public, it says the bona fide separation rules still apply.
Right.
So are the current members 55 and the new members 62?
Based on our definition of normal retirement age, yes, because we have a reg that says normal retirement age is the name of the formula. So assuming we call the formula 2 at 62, it would be 62.
Okay, and I want to make sure that I'm not missing something because one of my members called PERS and was told that there was an exemption to the 180-day rule because she's planning to come back as a retiree. She's going to retire at the end of this calendar year, come back in 2013, and wants to be able to work within that first 180 days. And the information she got on the phone made it sound like, yeah, we just go and take it to our board and send it to PERS, and you'll let her work within that first 180 days. So am I missing an exemption that we can get for our people for PERS whenever they retire, if they don't come back to work until 2013?
I mean, there is an exemption in the working after, there is an exemption process in the working after retirement section in PEPRA. It talks about what you need to do and how you can get an exemption to the 180 days.
Okay, and it pretty much just says we got to take it to our board and have them approve it, right?
Well, it has supposed to be for an whatever it says, it's supposed
It's
to
the
be.
same thing as what it's in the law right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're not putting together the process. The process is whatever process you place, and I'm sure we'll, just like now, we would ask you for a note and, whatever your board certified note is, and make sure that you've gotten it approved.
Okay, so if we get the board to approve it, we can bring her back within the first 180 days if she's got a bona fide, if she's over 55.
Yeah.
Okay.
Must be approved by the governing body of the employer. Yeah, the law says must be approved by the governing body of the employer in a public meeting. The appointment may not be placed on a consent calendar.
All right.
But in that case, it still needs to meet the bona fide separation that's already in the law. Yeah, the normal retirement age or 60 days.
Well, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up, and I think probably me and Anthony and David can stick around for a little while and answer questions offline if anybody has them. So.
Thanks, Danny. By the way, in case anybody's concerned about the clocks, for whatever reason, we're not quite sure why, have not been set back yet. So it's not really 12:30. It's really only 11:30. So next is changes to employer address files. I don't think this is actually going to take. I'm sorry, break in service. Right. So Cassie and Heather, you're going to talk about that, or did they go home? Oh, there they are.
Good morning. Okay, everybody stretch. So I just have a really short, brief update for you all regarding the CalPERS CalSTRS election. And me and Cassie are both on the agenda, but it's more of an update for CalPERS. So Cassie's available if any STRS questions arise. But I basically just wanted to give you the brief update that CalPERS has gone forward with proposed legislation to allow for a 120-day break in service when a member is not vested, which would, if signed, take effect for the January 1, 2014 year. We felt that that was going to be the best way for us to go forward with applying this election right consistently for our members who are not vested, was to allow for a specified break in service within the law. Another thing that we had discussed previously was that I understand that with the new CalPERS employer view access, there's been some limitations, and that you have been unable to view employment histories, which has caused some difficulties trying to address whether the election should or should not be given. And so I believe I've said it before, but I just want to reiterate to please feel free to call our employer call center if you run into this problem and you're having questions, you need some clarification on employment history on whether or not to give the election or not. And you can always contact my staff if you have their contact information. I think a lot of you may have Terry Cox's information. So we're open to assist. We do understand that that is that's kind of been taken away and caused some issues for you. So I just also wanted to let you know that we've been working very closely with CalSTRS to ensure a consistent application of the two sections of the law that define the eligibility for this election. So we have been meeting on a regular basis to discuss this. And let's see, the last time I presented, I was asked to review the CalPERS CalSTRS decision tree to ensure that there were no conflicts with the latest direction that we've provided. And I have, and there are no conflicts. In fact, if you look at the tree, there's the last two situations that are discussed do discuss the not vested versus the breaks in service with the vested members. So if the proposed legislation is signed, then obviously we're going to have to make some adjustments to that decision tree. And at that time, we'll work with CalSTRS to change the decision tree in that event. Okay. One other thing was that I was asked for a circular letter with specific examples regarding the not vested members with a break in service. We were really focused on getting this legislation pushed forward so that we could get it as soon as possible. But now that that has been sent forward, we will be focusing our attention on that circular letter. So I hope to have that soon for you with the examples. And that pretty much wraps it up. What's that? No, not yet. It's going to basically go and clean up legislation. So I want to thank you for your understanding and hope that you do see that. I know that this has been kind of a challenge with this new direction, but we did feel the legislation change was going to be the best way to consistently apply this election for all of our employees and members. So with that, if anyone has some questions.
I just heard about the legislation you mentioned. Why aren't we simplifying, instead of we have 120 days for this, 180 days for other areas, 6 months, so many things tied to these numbers? Why can't we make it simple? They can elect one time and it's irrevocable, and if they terminate, maybe they can have another election instead of positions and all this. It gets so messy.
So
we don't even need that decision tree or any of that. You know what I'm saying? If we can simplify it, that they have one-time election, and that's it, and they are locked into it. Something to that order.
The one-time irrevocable election is not off the table as at this point, but at the time that we were trying to push forward with getting this, allowance for these not vested members, we weren't going to have time to coordinate everything to get it in this bill. It's not off the table. It's still being discussed to try to put forth a one-time irrevocable election for this election.
I don't mean to offend anybody, but I know for last at least 15 to 17 years, we've been working on this.
Right, this election.
I mean, election.
This election, unfortunately, the fact that we have, I think we see it again with this new bill, you have inconsistencies in two different laws, and you're trying to go forward and get them to be more consistent. Sometimes timing's off. We're doing the best that we can. We're trying to work together, trying to assist when we can.
Yeah, we appreciate, but we just wanted if there is a way to simplify, that's all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Hi.
My question is because the wording has been consistently the same, but the interpretation has changed over the years. And I'm worried about those people that are being, because it's been interpreted differently. Because it says subsequent service. It doesn't say subsequent with no break. It says subsequent service with schools or vested. And so it's especially now because if they switch from a PERS position and go into a STRS, they're going to be a new member in STRS. And it's really going to hurt those people for the next year. And it seems to me it's an interpretation and not the way the law is written, and these people are going to be hurt because of it.
The history that comes out of this law is there has been changes to the way the law is written throughout the years. And in 2001, there was a large change, and that's when the vested part came in, and they also incorporated is employed into the law. So prior to that, that language was not in the law. So there has been differences in the way the law is written.
Okay, because I was looking up in Pearl, and maybe I have an old book or something, because it just said subsequent service, and it said with schools or vested. And so I guess that's why it's kind of like, well, it's still worded the same, so why is there no break? But you're saying now it says employed?
It says is employed, correct, in the current law. Okay. Thank you.
So now we'll move on to the discussion of the address file, and actually Justin Lair is filling in for Bill, who's not here.
How's it going, everyone? I'm not Bill. Bill's at home with a 3-month-old that's not bottle broken, so I think I got the better end of the deal. He's at home with his daughter. So I'll talk about the address file. We're making a few changes to it. Pretty straightforward. I'll make it short and sweet and to the point. We've modified a few fields. The source and unit code have been consolidated into one field. We used to have those in 2 different fields. Kind of redundant. Might as well just put them together. The street address is increased to 30 characters. Does anyone know what the longest street in America is? It's Northeast Kentucky Parkway, I believe. And that's 37 characters. So we were truncating some names in the past, so now we have 30 characters. So we'll make those, so now we can get the whole name in there. Apartment fields. We have these massive apartment complexes out here in California where there's building numbers and all that stuff. So now we've increased that to 10 characters so you can get the building number, name, all that stuff in there as well. An address effective date has been added. So the effective date's 8 characters. It's going to include that 4-date year or that 4-digit year. Effective date field will allow us to determine the most current address for our members. So the system will check for the most current address and it'll update it via that. An address report will be available in Excel. So you'll be able to get an address report. Districts will now have access to the address file. And redundant and unnecessary business rules have been removed. So for instance, the 038 edit, that used to come up and say reported by multiple report sources within the last 12 months. That'll no longer be there because we'll be using that date. So it'll just reference that date and it'll update for the newest one. We're going to ask that you refrain from submitting address files between November 22nd and December 2nd. We're going to be testing the system in the meantime. And the changes will go into effect December 3rd. And so by then we'll have a file format for you and you can send those in to us after December 3rd. And an up-to-date address file spec is available within SO. And Kelly is our address file expert. So if you guys have any questions, you can email Kelly. So that was quick. Any questions about the address file? Anything? Pretty straightforward, right? All right, well, thank you guys.
So, moving on to open forum, just, you know, we don't have a proposed calendar for next year, but I'm assuming that, does anybody want to discuss anything around the calendar? We're just going to go ahead with continuing with the 4 times a year here. Any particular concerns around the structure of the calendar, anything along those lines? And the next meeting is February 13th, so any issues around that? No, it's Valentine's Day. Yeah, hold on, we got a question over here.
With some of this stuff and some of the things still not decided, would it almost be a better idea to have an earlier meeting, like in beginning of January, so we can figure out what to do with payroll in January?
We're here anyway. I guess Carmen, do you have any particular thoughts on that? Is there any logistical issues around that?
I don't think I think we can make that happen. We just make sure it's not on a board day.
We have a board meeting, but that's on January 6th. So other than that, we'd have to look at the availability of the room, but I don't think that would be a problem if people felt that would be worthwhile.
We would keep it on a Wednesday, so would it be on the second week of January?
CalPERS board meets the third Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of third week of the month, so that would be out for us.
Okay.
We need to go back and check schedules.
Okay. So if that were to be possible, then I think what we would be looking at is, hold on a second, let me just look here. Be looking at January 9th. Because your meeting is in the week of the 14th, right? The CalPERS meeting?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So we can explore that. Is that something that people feel would be worthwhile?
It would all be irrelevant if we didn't get some resolutions to things. So if you guys do...
We'll certainly have better information around it. We will have put out, I'm assuming, a directive by then.
Okay.
And that may generate more questions,
Yeah,
but...
absolutely.
So would it be a half-day meeting?
Does this work? I mean, do you want to just sort of focus on implementation of AB 340, not worry about other issues? Okay, why don't we just plan on a half day, and we'll work toward that?
Too big for this room?
No, we can make it work. The other option is if we have too many people, we can actually set it up so we can have people over there next door watching as well as people can obviously watch from their desk back in the office. So we'll take a look at that, see if that works logistically in terms of January 9th, and we'll let people know. But you got a question?
I have a concern, actually. Certain topics, it seems like the audience has more questions on, and there seems to have been a trend the last probably 3 or 4 meetings that we've had where the audience is getting cut off. So can we maybe explore expanding the time for certain topics that we anticipate there being multiple questions? Because I know that myself, I've been cut off before asking all of my questions. Okay. Not necessarily during the STRS meeting, mainly during the PERS meeting with all of the new things that have come through.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm alone in this, but I have noticed it's been pretty consistent.
Well, I'd have to take some exception to that. Is it that we don't have enough time on the agenda specifically, or are there too many agenda items on the agenda?
Sometimes typically there's not enough time set for that specific topic. Sometimes there are items on the agenda that could have had less time because they weren't as I don't want to say important, but they weren't as crucial to getting our jobs done as to some. So it's like some of our agenda time has been taken up for something that we don't need to go back to do the job, and some of the stuff that we've needed to do, our time has been cut. We've been cut off from asking questions.
We can look into that. We always, at the end of each meeting, take into consideration your potential agenda items for the next time.
Right.
You always have access to us through our email, through our phone. Let us know what's important to you. And we do stick around after the fact. You know, if we're cutting you off, it's no slight on an individual or anybody else. It's simply trying to respect the agenda and the process itself.
And
So
I'm
what
not
we will
shy
work on
from getting people after the meetings.
And actually, I think on our end, you know, particularly having the meetings here and our staff are here, if for some reason you need to continue to have a meeting after lunch or extend the lunch so we have less time, as long as we're aware of it, we'll just come down later. I don't think that's the critical thing. If you need more time than just the morning for the CalPERS side, we're not going to be offended by that. And if we need to, you know, then we'll just try to readjust our agenda to reflect that. So I think between the two of us, we can make some necessary changes to accommodate your concerns. I think we had a question over here.
We get the agendas, but I was wondering, because a lot of the questions come up on the slides, would it be possible, and I know that you guys have, you know, you're pressing to get everything prepared for these meetings, would it be possible to send out the slides as an attachment to the email so that then questions could be generated in advance and maybe emailed in, so that then you guys already know the questions? Because I think we hit things.
The presentation files are put on our CalSTRS.com site, on the advisory committee site before the meeting. So I'm not sure that would
help a lot.
How far in advance?
We try to get it at least a couple of days before the meeting so that the employers can pull the information off of the website before they come. So.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you want to submit the questions, you can also do that, and that gives us a chance to do the research prior to the meeting. So that's helpful. Thanks, Kyle.
Hi, I'm Rafaela from Stakeholder Relations, and we coordinate the SCAC meetings for CalPERS. And our website is also updated with the presentation materials before the meeting. So I just want to let everyone know that as well. And we certainly appreciate receiving any questions beforehand. Thank you.
Okay. Any other issues so as far as the calendar is concerned, we're going to continue ahead with, except we will have a special meeting. We'll look to see if a special meeting on January 9th in the morning, or maybe starting the same time as now. We can certainly, and the only topic will just be implementation of AB 340. We can, you know, however much time we need, we will take, although presumably it takes at least 3 hours through lunch, so hopefully that should be enough. Are there any other issues that people want to bring up at this time? Are there other topics when we get back to the February meeting? Are there other issues besides just normal things around legislation, probably some further implementation issues? Any other topics that you would like either one of us to include in our respective meetings? And if anything comes up in the meantime, feel free to email us and we can certainly add them to the agenda. But if not, anything else? Then we're right on time. Good job. Thank you. Have a good holiday.